Welcome to Flipping the Classroom, a presentation by Academic Tech Services, adapted from presentations by Robert Talbert. Are you looking for ways to make your course more engaging while also having more face time with your students to assess their knowledge of the material? Would you like more opportunities to watch your students apply knowledge instead of just watching them absorb it? Have you heard of the concept of flipped learning and wondered if it could change your course for the better? If you've thought about any of these questions, then flipping may be right for you. In our classes, there are typically two phases of learning: transmission and assimilation. The transmission phase is when students are presented with new knowledge. This phase typically occurs in a classroom setting, and the cognitive complexity is fairly basic. The instructor is usually fully and immediately present for students during this phase. The assimilation phase is when students practice the new knowledge through homework and other post-class learning activities. These activities are typically completed at home, in a dorm, or online, and the cognitive complexity, while varied, is usually more advanced. The instructor is almost never immediately available to the students during this phase. We can use Bloom's taxonomy to visualize this more traditional approach to teaching. What this also shows us is that this approach typically asks students to complete their most complex and challenging learning activities when they don't have an instructor readily available to assist them if they have questions or problems. But from a student perspective, does it make sense to assign increasingly complex activities in an environment where the instructor's availability is decreased or non-existent? By reversing or flipping the traditional approach, students receive more face time with their instructors during the complex learning activities, and spend time outside class completing the more basic ones. Another benefit to flipping a class is that instructors have more opportunities to observe their students during the assimilation phase, allowing them to more closely monitor the progress of their class. One of the biggest misconceptions about flipping is that it can be accomplished by simply moving the lecture prior to class and doing more hands-on activities during the class. True, in its simplest form, this is a style of flipping, but a well-thought-through and effective flip actually requires a bit more work to examine the pedagogical implications of the flip and to determine the most effective means of executing it. Another misconception is that when you flip a class, you need to flip all of the class sessions. In reality, as effective as flipping can be, some content just does best in a more traditional setting. The first step to flipping a class should always be to determine what sessions to flip, and then determining how to flip them. Critical decision-making and thoughtful course design can make the difference between a flip and a flop. If you're sold on the concept of flipping and feel that it is the right approach for you, your content, and your students, then there are 5 straightforward steps you can follow to get you on the road to flipping out. The first step is to select a session that you would like to flip, and then determine the learning objectives for that session. Most instructors already have a short list of objectives created for every session, but when flipping, it is important to have a detailed understanding of what your students will be accomplishing. Ask yourself, what exactly do I want my students to be able to do after this session? The second step requires organizing your objectives by cognitive complexity. It is important that you don't force your objectives to be organized chronologically, as flipping relies on the instructor knowing where the objectives cross from being basic to being complex. Bloom's taxonomy can be a useful tool for the organization process. Place the most basic objectives at the bottom of the list and build up to the most advanced ones. Once your objectives are organized, determine where the objectives become complex enough that they need to be covered during a class session. This is where the complexity cutoff lies. Everything below the complexity cutoff is covered prior to class. Everything above is covered during. If you used Bloom's taxonomy to assist you in the organization process, the place where the complexity cutoff lies will vary for every session, and you should not be concerned if one class session ends up with a cutoff at the analyzing level and another at the level of understanding. When this step is completed, you will have two lists of objectives, one that will be covered prior to class and one that will be covered during class. And now you're ready to put together your learning activities. Begin with the pre-class learning activities and design and create them with the intention of providing a foundation or a structure for your class session. When designing the pre-class learning activities, make sure your students understand what objectives they're fulfilling and also provide them with an opportunity to test their knowledge. Providing an opportunity to test knowledge before coming to class gives the students confidence that they understand the material to the depth that you require. This also gives students who don't understand certain concepts the chance to revisit the pre-class learning activities if needed. The final step to designing a flipped class is developing the in-class learning activities. These activities should provide sense-making to the content via hands-on, relevant, thorough, and active learning activities. Be sure to design a knowledge check at the beginning of the session as a means of refreshing your students' memory of the content and to also provide you, the instructor, with an understanding of where your students stand with the material. Flipping a class need not be confusing or complex. Your friendly ATS instructional designers are happy to assist any instructor in flipping any part of their course. To request instructional design support, click on the link provided at the end of this presentation. And in no time, you'll be on your way to helping your students get more out of their time with you and give you more time to watch your students grow. This presentation was created with Prezi.com, recorded and edited in Camtasia Relay with Camtasia Studio, and uploaded, transcribed, and annotated with YouTube.com. Click on the provided links to access and share this presentation on Prezi.com or to submit an academic technology proposal application.